We are going to start with opening comments. The water, sewer, and trash bills, which are now all combined, are due March 3rd. If you have any questions about your bill, contact the Treasurer Collector's Office at Nahant Town Hall. Winter parking ban is in effect until March 20th, 2025, from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. So that's midnight to 6 a.m. No vehicles on the street during this time, regardless of the snow parking ban. Contact the Nahant Police Department if you need a winter parking sticker. Town election nomination papers are available in the town clerk's office. They're due back to the town clerk by March 7th, 2025. For a full list of open seats, visit the town elections page at nahant.org. The annual town election is Saturday, April 26, 2025. Polls open at 7 a.m. and close at 8 p.m. at the Nahant Town Hall. Annual dog licenses are due back to the town clerk by April 1st, 2025. A $20 late fee will be added for any licenses received after April 15th, 2025. The Charles Kelly Scholarship application is now available. Applications are due back by April 18th, 2025. Visit the scholarship page at nahant.org for more information. So this is a $1,000 scholarship, anonymously judged essay on what public service means to you. And so I encourage all high school seniors that are going on to a accredited 2-year or 4-year college to apply for that scholarship. There'll be no delay in trash pickup this week. Please put your barrels out by 7 a.m. on the day of your regular trash pickup. Okay, any opening other comments from you, Gene, or Rob?
Yeah, it just occurred to me that, and I want to thank him publicly for Joe Mellon for always posting the agenda on Facebook and creating a summary of the meetings just so that everybody gets a chance to look at it. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah,
that's a good one, Gene. Hear on that.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for mentioning that, Gene, and thanks, Joe, for keeping our public informed.
That he is.
All right, so we have a public hearing. This public hearing is to consider opting out of vote by mail and opting in for in-person early voting for the annual town election. I know our town clerk, Diane Dunphy, is on the call. So we'll go ahead and make the motion, and then we'll have discussion. Maybe Diane will help us through some of this stuff.
Mr. Chairman, I move the Board of Selectmen open the public hearing.
Seconded.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Discussion. Diane,
I'm here.
do you have something you would like to say?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So we did have a meeting of the Board of Registrars and went over the cost versus cost benefits or lack thereof to doing vote by mail. We have over 1,800 households and over 2,800 voters. So if we were to do the vote by mail, it costs us about 50 cents to send out the postcard, and then depending on how many we had close to 1,000 people looking for ballots. It comes out to a cost of about $2,500 to the town to do a vote by mail. And the last 3 elections, we've only had approximately 300 people at a town election. So we voted to opt out of vote by mail for those reasons. I thought it was cost prohibitive. And what we are doing is we were going to opt into early voting. Typically, we'll do it the Saturday before, but that's Easter weekend and school vacation, so I don't think there'll be a lot of people around. So we've opened up the town hall to do early voting. Excuse me. Monday is a holiday, so Tuesday through Thursday. Friday you can't do it. You have to be within you have to stop your early voting within 48 hours of the election. So early voting would be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday from 9 to 1, I believe. The option to do absentee ballots is still available, which is another reason why if you're not going to be in town, you're going to be out of town, you can still come up and request an absentee ballot. You'd come to the town clerk's office and fill out a form, and we can send it to you if you're not going to be in town that day. So that's still an option to get a ballot by mail, or you can email me and request an absentee ballot for the same reason. And my email address you can find on the website, or it's ddunfee, it's DUNFEE @nahant.org. Just email me and request an absentee ballot, and we can still mail some of them out. And
Thanks, Diane.
that's pretty. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
All right, yeah, thanks. Well, that sounds good to me. I think, the fact that the absentee ballot is still available, and so if someone knows they're gonna be away, they can still get that, with minimal effort, and, they also have the early voting in person at town hall for the 3 days leading up to the meeting, so it seems to me like, anybody that's really interested in voting, if they're not here on the actual election day, will have that opportunity. And, it saves the money that you mentioned. To me, it doesn't really make sense to mail out things to 1,800 people if a small percentage of those are actually going to be taking advantage of it. That's my opinion, but any comments from anyone else or any questions for Diane, Jean, or Rob?
No, I'm good.
It sounds like Diane has done the analysis on this, and this is a logical approach.
If I
Um,
could,
Yep,
Josh,
go ahead, Dan. We can hear you.
I don't know whether to vote on, have you take your vote first, or just, I was going to just do a quick review of, what the positions are, and who we have papers pulled out, what positions we have papers pulled out, and which ones there has been no papers pulled yet, if you want me to.
That's a great
I
idea.
can wait till after the vote.
Um,
I can wait till after your vote, or I can do
no,
it now.
Well, yeah, why don't we vote and then we'll just pause while you do that.
Okay,
All right, so
yes.
roll call vote on
Have we read the motion?
Yes. No, we didn't do the motion
Oh.
to
We just opened the
oh,
hearing,
you're
didn't we?
right, you're right.
Right.
Okay.
We
Mr.
should
Chairman,
just
I
vote.
move to approve the recommendation of the Board of Registrars to opt out of vote by mail and opt in to early voting for the annual town election on April 26, 2025. Early voting to take place in the Nahant Town Hall from April 22nd, 2025 to April 24th, 2025 from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and April 25th, 2025 from 9 a.m. to 12 noon.
Seconded.
All right, so thanks for that motion, Rob. I don't think we voted on opening the meeting, actually. I think we read the motion, seconded, and then had the discussion. Is
No.
that, am I remembering correctly?
You're right.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to the roll call vote on opening the hearing. Okay, so roll call vote.
Gene Canty, aye.
Rob Tibble, aye.
Josh Antrim, aye. Okay. So the hearing's open, and I guess we already
Rob?
heard Diane's discussion. So
Rob?
would you? Oh, go ahead, Diane.
Rob, there is a mistake on that motion. If you could just leave off the Friday, Mass General Laws doesn't allow us to have early voting within 48 hours. So just the 3 days, and then leave the 25th off when you make the motion.
Okay, I should reread it then?
Yes,
But without Friday.
Which was April 22nd.
No,
5th, April 25th. There will
April,
not be early voting.
April 25th, there will not be voting. Okay.
Thank you.
The 24th. And the 25th is right. Yeah. Okay, I'm with you now.
Okay. I move to approve the recommendation of the Board of Registrars to opt out of vote by mail and opt in to early voting for the annual town election on April 26th, 2025. Early voting to take place in Nahant Town Hall from April 22nd, 2025 to April 24th, 2025 from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m.
seconded.
Okay, any discussion? Think we kind of had the discussion. Unless anyone has anything else, we'll go to a roll call vote.
Gene
Okay.
Canty, aye.
Josh Antrim, aye. How about you, Rob?
Rob Tibble, aye. I'm sorry, it was a little broken up.
Okay. All right, so Diane, before we close the hearing, do you want to make your announcement?
Sure. So there are several positions, typically they're the same every year, but we have Selectman is available for a 3-year term. We have 2 people who have taken out papers already. There's the town moderator position, which is a 1-year term. We have 1 person that's taken papers out. There is the town clerk. There is half a person that's taken out her papers yet. They're in her office. There is the library trustee. There is 1, that's a 3-year term. That is 1 person has taken papers out. There's the school committee. There are 2 different positions available. 1 is a 3-year term and 1 is the remainder on a 2-year term, and there have been no papers pulled for those. There's the constable, that's 1 year per term. We have 1 person took out papers. The housing authority, there is 1 position for 5 years, and those papers, someone has taken out papers on that. And then we have the Board of Assessors, there's 1 3-year term. No one has taken papers out on that. And then there's Planning Board. There's 1 position for 5 years. No one has taken papers out on that. And there is 1 position that would be ending with a 2-year term. And we have 1 candidate that's taken out papers on that. So the only place we don't have papers is the Board of Assessors. Candidates is the Board of Assessors and the school committee.
What's the deadline, Diane?
Thank you, Jean. Yep. The deadline to pick up papers, to pick up your nomination papers would be March 5th. The deadline to return them is March 7th. You only need 25 registered voters of Nahant to sign your nomination papers to become eligible.
Thank you.
All right, so that's
You're welcome.
2 weeks from today for people to pull their papers, and 2 weeks and 2 days to turn them in with the 25 signatures.
Correct.
So I hope people step up for school committee for sure. That's such an important role. Assessor and sorry, Diane, could you repeat what the planning board situation is again?
So there's 1 full term, which is 5 years. So there's 1 full term, 5-year position available. And then there's 1, which is a 2-year term. It's someone resigned before their term was up. So there's 2 years remaining on that term. That one, someone did take out papers. So at least we have 1 candidate, but we don't have any candidate for the Board of Assessors position that's up and the 5-year term for planning board.
Okay, so I hope anyone out there that's listening or anyone that Melon lets know via Facebook posts considers stepping up and helping out the town. So these are important roles.
Yes, they are.
All right. Thanks, Diane. We'll close the hearing if you think we're done.
I think so.
All right, so I move that the selectmen close the public hearing on opting out of voting by mail and opting in for in-person voting for the annual town election. We have a second.
Second,
All right, any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Gene Canty, aye.
Rob Tibble, aye.
Josh Antrim, aye. Okay, new business. We have a vote to approve a event request for the Nahant Youth Spring Soccer Program. Someone want to read that motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the Nahant Youth Spring Soccer Program on Saturdays starting at 8 a.m. from April 26, 2025 to June 21st, 2025 at Flash Road Park.
Second,
Any discussion? It's hard to believe that spring is on the way, but it is. So looking forward to seeing the kids out there at Flash Road playing some soccer. Any other discussion? Hearing and seeing none, roll call vote.
Gene Canty, aye.
Rob Tibble, aye.
Josh Antrim, aye. We have a lobster trap storage lease to approve. We have a motion there.
Mr. Chairman, I move the Board of Selectmen vote to approve a lobster trap storage lease for 2025 to Timothy O'Keefe.
Second,
Any discussion? I assume that Tim O'Keefe has filled out his form and submitted his payments, so and that's why he's on the agenda today, Tony, right?
He has.
All right, great. Any discussion? Okay, roll call vote.
Gene Canty, aye.
Rob Tibble, aye.
Josh Antrim, aye. We have a vote to authorize the town administrator to award and negotiate sale of real property known as the 12 lots of Coast Guard housing property. I move that the Board of Selectmen, pursuant to the vote taken under Article 20 of the May 15, 2021 annual town meeting, to dispose of the parcels of land located at 296 Castle Road, Lot 2, 300 Castle Road, Lot 4, 114 Castle Road, Lot 5, 116 Castle Road, Gardner Road, Lot 6, 4 Goddard Drive, Lot 8, and 8 Goddard Drive, Lot 10, and to authorize the town administrator to execute on behalf of the Board of Selectmen any and all purchase and sale agreements, affidavits, settlement statements, and other documents necessary or appropriate to accomplish the sale of the foregoing lots.
Seconded,
Any discussion?
We
Go ahead,
we took this vote during the last offering. Essentially, what this allows me to do is be the signatory on these important documents that are time sensitive, related to purchase and sale and closing. So actually, once you approve this vote, we'll have when the minutes are created for this meeting, we'll have that certified by the town clerk, and that actually gets included in the closing documents that gets registered with the Registry of Deeds. So it's an important vote that confirms my authority to sign the documents.
I think, speaking for myself, it's my pleasure to give you that authority. And I hear we have some continued good news in that process. So Any discussion from Gene or Rob?
No, thank you, Tony.
Yeah. Okay, roll call vote.
Gene Canty, aye.
Rob Tibble, aye.
Josh Antrim, aye. We have a discussion regarding releasing the unused stormwater drainage easement behind 5 Christopher Drive. Can you introduce us to this topic, Tony?
Yes, and Dan can take it from me. But just to introduce it, there was a property sold on 5 Christopher Drive. The properties along Christopher Drive there's an old easement for utility use from prior to that property being subdivided and the lots being and Christopher Drive actually being created. So it came up as an issue during the sale of this property. The town investigated it. We don't use that easement. We have no need for that. Our utilities are in Christopher Drive. So we double checked that with DPW. And then it was a process of understanding how do we release this access right on their deed. And that started with, well, how was it provided to the town? So we looked back, did some historical research with Dan and the town clerk and then the registry to understand, was it a town meeting process that put it in place? Because if it did, it would require a town meeting vote to remove it. We discovered that it was not a town meeting vote. And so it can simply be done here by the Board of Selectmen. So we have no need for it. We have no use for it. We have no future need for it. All our utilities are in Christopher Drive versus in the old. I don't think we ever had utilities in that old access right space. But Dan, can you take it from there?
Yeah, I can. No, actually, Tony, we do need town meeting vote. I sent you an email earlier this week. I guess you didn't get to it. But we did go back and do some research in archives. And I was hoping that Tony was right. We were both hoping we were right because it's much simpler. But this all started when this actually was an easement that stretched from Nahant Road to what was Rockledge Manor, back when it was a hotel. There was a travel easement between the two locations. It has then morphed into a stormwater easement. And it all came to fruition when in 1959, 1960, the guy named Roland, I think his name was, his last name, he wanted to register the property and then start subdividing it. So he had to give notice to all the abutters in the town. So the town said, hey, no, we have a stormwater easement over this property, so we have to honor that. And this name might refresh some memories. The guy was Mayland P. Lewis. Does that all sound familiar?
Very familiar with the name. And the Rowland
Yeah, I think
family also.
Yep. And that, everyone knows Henry Hall. And when his stepfather owned all those greenhouses, that's where they were, right over there, where Christopher Drive is now. Is it just rows and rows of them? So of course that's not what that's there now. So they agreed by stipulation that the town can have, and they wouldn't fight over that easement. So then since then we've been we had rights to it, but as Zach told us recently, we don't use it. As Tony mentioned accurately, the stormwater stuff and the utility stuff goes underground now, so there's no need for it. And this whole current issue came up when the folks at 5 Christopher Drive were looking to sell their property after being there for decades, and the new owners wanted to try to remove this cloud from the title, so to speak. And that's what sort of got this thing all started. So I was hoping Tony was right, but at the end of the day, we do need town meeting vote because the town meeting has not acted on it before because it was gone through a stipulation. But at the end of the day, it's still a interest in land. And using the examples I found from many other towns in the area, we have to go to town meeting. It's a very simple vote. It needs a 2/3 majority, and then we can file a declaration/release with the registry. And then that should be it. Oh, I should also say that we need Zach to declare that it's no longer necessary for public use and put a value on it. We're not just giving this away. We have to, Zach has to put a value on it, and then we present that to the what they call the subservient tenement, which is the landowner. And then if they want to purchase it back, well, that's great. And then they can do that. And then we go from there. So it's a very simple process.
But
But
Dan,
there's more to it than what's open.
can we talk through that a little bit more?
Sure.
My understanding when we were going through the research was that unlike town, it's not town-owned property. The way it was written in the deed was that we had the right to access it for utility needs of some sort. That we didn't actually have like an interest. We had a right to the area, but we didn't have like in-fee interest. Now, I don't know enough about, the legal definitions of those sorts of things, but can you explain, the difference?
Yes.
We're not, in other words, it's not like we're surplusing town property.
It's not a procurement issue. Right.
Right.
So interest in land means like the highest interest is a fee simple, right? If you own property, like Rob owns a place over on Fox Hill, and Josh is on Nahant Road. So that's fee simple. You own that property outright. You can ban everyone from it and do what you want with it within certain restrictions. But in terms of being able to use property, there's what they call easements, and we have tons of them all around. We have the one right on the castle and Nahant regarding the drainage stuff. This is a drainage easement. We have a right to come over that property for purposes of stormwater drainage. So that is an interest in land. And pursuant to, I have it right here. The statute is at play here is for 40, chapter 40, section 15, that requires us to abandon an easement, but in this case, only through a town meeting with 2/3 vote. Again, I was hoping that we could avoid that, but I don't see our ability to do that given what we know now.
Okay. All right. So there's no action for the selectmen to take tonight.
Oh, but at some point we should get it on the warrant, but you and I can talk about that later, Tony, to get this more prepared for the next meeting.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to the property owners or future property owners that came with this request to see if that's something they want to still move forward with. I mean,
Okay.
they may, I don't know if they're going to want to push it to a town meeting vote or if they'll be more comfortable with just knowing that the town has, no plans or no need or use for it. So
Okay.
I'd like to double check that with them now that you say we need a town meeting vote.
Okay.
One thing, when I look at the map of 5 Christopher Drive, it seems sort of impossible that that's the only lot on Christopher Drive that would be affected by this, because they're sort of, you turn onto Christopher Drive from Wharf Street, and then it takes a right-hand turn, and they're the middle house after you take that right-hand turn. So there must be other lots that have the same easement. So I'm wondering if we should look into that and consider adding the other lots or finding out if the owners of the other lots are similarly interested.
Yeah, the easement goes behind 3, 7, 9, and 11. And then
Okay.
goes up through that property to the big property to, I think that must be whatever that rental place is up there, to Nahant Road. But yeah, that's a good point.
3, 7, 3, 5, 7.
9, 11.
I'm looking at the map. Looking.
Here, I'll show you on GIS.
Yeah, I'm not doing it. Yeah, okay. So, right. So now I see how it gets up to Nahant Road. To 325 Nahant Road, I guess, or possibly could also be
This section off of Nahant Road, I'll have to double check with Zach. We may use that to get to Christopher Drive. And then, we may have the utilities may go this way onto Christopher Drive, and then we don't use the easement that cuts through
Yeah.
114,
Then
113,
if you
112.
scroll down a little bit, how does it get out of Christopher Drive? Okay, so it dog legs along the
Yeah.
road there.
Yeah,
Yeah, so maybe we should make the effort to contact 3 and
Yeah, these
7
ones here.
and 9 and see if they are what their view of the situation is, I guess. Okay, so more to come on this anyway, right?
yes.
Yep.
All right, is there any more discussion on this drainage easement? It sounds like we'll be talking about it at the next meeting so that we can figure out, well, A, if the property owner wants to go to town meeting, and if so, then we'll have to compose an article. Right?
Yep.
Okay,
Exactly.
any more discussion? All right, then, let's move on to opening the annual town meeting warrant. I guess I'll take this. I move that the Board of Selectmen open the 2025 annual town meeting warrant. We have a second.
Second,
Okay, discussion. So this will be to open the warrant and then send it to the Advisory and Finance Committee for their review. Tony, do you have something you wanted to
Yes.
discuss?
Let me share my screen. So I'll walk you through the warrant. Hold on one second. I got 3 different screens going here.
All right, we can see that.
Okay.
Perfect.
So we start with a lot of the standard warrant articles that you see in every town meeting. Town meeting is on May 17th, 12:30 here at the town hall. The first article are transfers. So that would be transferring funds in the existing fiscal year from one account to another. I don't know if we're going to have any of those. We'll know. Usually those numbers are finalized the day of town meeting. Snow and ice, same thing. By the time we get to town meeting, we'll know how much of a deficit we ran in snow and ice. So that's what that article is, to transfer funds into that account to cover whatever deficit we draw. Article 3 is prior year bills. So if we by the state finance law requires that if you have a bill that was unpaid in the previous fiscal year, it must be voted on by town meeting. I don't believe we have any of those as of now, but we could by town meeting. Article 4 is the salary classification plan. That's the first section of the book that lays out the salary ranges and the union agreements for all appointed positions. Article 5 is compensation for elected positions. So that's where we vote on the salaries for elected positions. Article 6, this is unique. So this article is to rescind a vote from last year's town meeting where we appropriated $370,000. 200,000 came from free cash. 170,000 came from water retained earnings. And we were appropriating those funds for phase 1 of the water meter replacement project. What we're doing here is we're rescinding that vote so we can use those funds for other items in this year's budget, but it does not risk the project. Actually, later in this warrant, you'll see we have our typical MWRA borrowing authorization. In speaking with the MWRA, about our water meter conversion project and the lead service line requirements placed on all municipalities from the federal government through the state to us. They're actually saying use the 0% interest loan program. You have the authorization and the ability, you have the funds available to do the entire project through the loan program. You can do it faster. There's no financial negative impact because it's a zero interest loan. And we can do it in 1 year, one phase, hopefully 1 year versus spreading it out over 3 years. And the value in doing that faster is that our lead service inventory requirement requires that we identify where any lead service lines in the water system may exist. And that's talking about from the water main to a household. The town owns the service line from the water main to the shutoff valve that's usually in the curb. And then from the shutoff valve to the home is owned by the property owner. But we have to identify that entire length. Through our historical, the information that we've been able to gather through property cards, tie cards, we're currently looking through the last time the town did a water meter replacement project, and the data there. We need to come up with documented information that shows that we either know what the material of the service line is or we don't know. And if you have unknowns, in the year 2027, the state is going to require the towns either investigate and or replace 10% of your unknowns a year until you do them all. So the name of the game right now is eliminating as many unknowns as possible. Most of our unknowns are from the valve to the house. And when we do that water meter replacement project, and we actually have to go into the house to replace the water meter, we're going to add to the scope of that project that we investigate, or our contractor who's doing it, investigate and document the material of the service line coming into the house. So that will help us identify from the valve to the house and eliminate a lot of unknowns. So there's, long story short, by going through the zero interest loan, there's no financial negative, and we're able to do the project faster and eliminate a lot of unknowns for the lead service line requirement, inventory requirement. We also, as you'll see when we get into the omnibus budget, we have less free cash than we did last year. We're at a healthy amount for our size budget, but we have less than we did last year, and we have a deficit in our omnibus in our general fund. So maneuverings and balancing our budget, we need free cash for certain uses to balance our budget. So pulling the funds from last year in this article, rescinding last year's article, gives us $370,000 to put towards free cash or capital needs in the current year. So let me add, do you have any questions on that?
Nope, makes every sense in the world. We're doing the project faster with a zero interest loan, and it has a huge side benefit with the lead service line replacement program that is mandatory for us. So makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know if anyone else has any comments.
I think it, from a public service standpoint, identifying these lead lines as soon as possible is obviously huge as far as letting the homeowner know that they have an issue. This is our way of getting at that much quicker at no extra cost to the town.
Yeah. And, I don't want to alarm the public. We are required to test our water supply on an annual basis. And the last one was in February, early February, and we are below the threshold that would require some sort of action. So our lead detection amounts are below any sort of issue that would require some sort of action. So we believe that there is very minimal amount of lead in our water service lines. However, it's being able to prove with documentation that it doesn't exist. That's really what we're going through now.
Tony, when is the last known use of lead?
Well, 1988 is when the law went into place that new construction could not use lead in their water lines. So that was our first effort in this process of looking at property cards and property records to see when the homes were built. Anything after 1988, we know does not include lead. Anything built before 1988, we got to go through another layer of data research.
Thank you.
And then, like for instance, Fox Hill Road, that entire water main has been replaced. Howe Road, in the last X amount of years, we're looking at what water main replacement jobs we've done. So we can say with that documentation, we can prove that at least from the main to the valve, we know is not lead. Those would have all been replaced with that job. Really, a lot of our unknowns, and MWRA was kind of, they said, wow, I've never heard of that problem before. We have like really detailed tie cards of identifying the location, where the service line exists, what the material is, what the size of it is. But it was identified by saying, for instance, Thibault, Fox Hill Road, instead of saying the house number on it. So Owen, our intern, actually went through 1,600 tie cards and cross-referenced real estate documentation to identify them into a house number. So then once that was in, we eliminated a lot through that process, but we still have a lot to go. So anyways, that's a little bit further. We're kind of going down or digressing here, but that's essentially Article 6 is rescinding a previous vote from last year, freeing up $370,000 to be used this year. Article 7 is the omnibus budget. I'll get into that when we get to the next part of our agenda. Article 8, standard. It's authorizing appropriation from the water sewer enterprise account. Article 9 is standard. We appropriate $50,000 from retained earnings in the water sewer enterprise account for paving. So this helps us cover costs of water or sewer breaks and the repaving of the street after the fix. Rubbish enterprise, standard article authorizing appropriation out of the rubbish enterprise account. Compost area, we appropriate $33,000 from our enterprise account to go towards costs associated with removing yard waste from the compost area. 12 and 13 are our revolving accounts. State law requires that we vote on these on an annual basis. Actually, the governor filed a municipal modernization act that would eliminate the need for us to vote on this on an annual basis. So hopefully that goes through the legislature and it's one less thing we have to do on an annual basis. Other post-employment benefits. This is an article where we take free cash and invest it into our post-employment benefit account. We've done this for the last 5, 6 years on an annual basis at $25,000. This OPEB account factors into our bond rating. So ensuring that we are investing in it helps our bond rating over time. Usually, right next to this article, you would see a stabilization article where we take free cash and put it into stabilization. Unfortunately, this year, we're unable to do that. However, we're at around 7 or 8% of our total budget in our stabilization account currently. We've talked about this in previous meetings, how much we've invested in it over the last 5, 6 years. It's at a healthy point. DOR recommends 5%. We're above that. Our goal has been to get to 10%. But this year, because of the constraints in the budget, we're using that free cash amount to put it towards our debt burden to free up $100,000 in the general fund to help balance our budget. So we won't be contributing to stabilization this year, but it is healthy. And I do think that in future years, we'll get right back on track with contributing to stabilization. Paving, this is an annual article. Our 5-year paving plan calls for about a $300,000 investment on an annual basis to keep up with our plan. We usually get about $90,000 in Chapter 90 money. We've attempted over the last couple of years, we've paid for at least half of this out of free cash. Unfortunately, can't do that this year. So this is to borrow the full $200,000 to go towards paving. Article 16 is a capital item for DPW. It's a new water sewer DPW truck. This article, because of the previous article where we rescind last year's 370, this is 100 of the 170 in water retained earnings that we're pulling back from last year going towards purchasing this vehicle, which is better than having to borrow for it. So it's a good use of the funds. It's made possible by the approval of Article 6. Article 17 is the MWRA Water Capital. We are allowed to authorize borrowing of $500,000 on an annual basis. So we do that. It's a zero interest loan. It doesn't necessarily mean that we will borrow that amount of money, but it's good to continuously on an annual basis get the authorization so that our total amount of authorization grows with MWRA. And because we've done that over the last X amount of years, it gives us that capacity to do it for the water meter project this year. Article 18 is authorizing us to use the Chapter 90 money for paving or other transportation-related needs. 19, 20, and 21 are placeholders. So we're still working on the language for these articles. 19 is amending the charter to rename the Board of Selectmen to the Select Board. This was an article that, or an effort that we talked about a few months ago. The Board of Selectmen, that is, talked about this and the desire to, come up to times here and change it from Selectmen to Select Board. Article 20 is related to the Coast Guard housing lots. So in 2021, I believe, the town authorized the town to sell the Coast Guard housing lots. Part of that language said 2 offerings over 2 years. We are currently in the second offering. We started this in September of 24. So that 2-year period goes to September of 26. But the offerings, we're in the second offering now. We know that we'll definitely need at least one more offering. And it's, we had a bid opening yesterday. We have one tomorrow. We have two next week and two the week after. And then you have to close on those properties. In the first offering, we had a property that didn't sell, lot number 5. And so we're including it in the second offering. So it's possible that something like that could happen in the current offering number 2. So for that reason, we want to get authorization for additional offerings so that we can continue this process and sell all the lots. Article 21. So this is authorization to borrow about $800,000. This is related to the FEMA grant that we just got for Short Beach Dune. It's a 75% match. We had previously borrowed $500,000 for this project. So our 1.3, if this gets approved, our $1.3 million match comes with a return of $3.5 million from the feds. But it's possible, FEMA told us that during the project that our match may increase up to 90%. And therefore, we wouldn't have to spend as much. We wouldn't have to spend 1.3. So this is authorization to borrow. It ensures that we stay qualified for the grant, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to borrow the full amount. Article 22 is community preservation. We'll get those articles as the CPC goes through their process. So it's kind of a placeholder. There will be sub-articles here once we get their final articles from CPC. 23 is amending the floodplain bylaw. This should be simple language. We just don't have it yet, but last year, you may remember, we amended our floodplain bylaw in order for our bylaw to be compliant with the federal model bylaw, which was updated a couple years ago. So we amended our local bylaw last year. We submitted it to the state, and they came back and said, perfect, except one little thing. You have to identify who the floodplain administrator is in the bylaw. Our bylaw right now says the town administrator shall appoint the floodplain administrator. So the building commissioner is our floodplain administrator. And what we need to do is call that out in the bylaw, that the building commissioner is the floodplain administrator. So that's what that will look like. And then Article 24, the accessory dwelling units bylaw. As you know, planning board put together a ADU bylaw. They'll be going through a public hearing process to amend our zoning laws to be compliant with the new state ADU law. And then continue committees. Now, these articles can be rearranged. We can move them around. We typically will open the warrant at future meetings and add or delete or move. So this is the first version of the warrant, and we'll be sending this to the Finance Committee. The other items that are not included here. Let me just pull that up. In speaking with the town clerk and town council, we talked about our general bylaws and potentially doing some house cleaning there and rearranging the order of them. Right now, our general bylaws go, Article 1 through 12, and then it skips to like 19 through 23 or whatever it is. And a separate document, the police bylaws, is Article 13 through 18. So we talked about potentially cleaning that up, moving the town bylaws, together, and bringing the police bylaws into that document and, rearranging the numbers of them. It's not changing any of the bylaws, it's just a little bit of house cleaning. So we're still looking at that. It's a potential additional article. Also, notification requirements for town meeting. The state law requires that the town warrant get posted 7 days before an annual town meeting, 14 days before a special town meeting. Our bylaws say that we post 14 days in advance for both. So in speaking with the clerk, the idea was, should we clean that up so it's consistent with state law and have annual town meeting requirement of posting be 7 days, as the state law says? So we're looking at that too. We are, let's see, where else? We got an article from the planning board requesting a part-time employee to assist the planning board and other boards. I spoke with them last night and explained to them that we simply can't afford the additional part-time employee, so it's not included in this warrant. I also received articles related to veteran abatements from the town assessor and our veteran service officer. And we're just running through those, trying to understand what the cost impact could be to the overlay account. So we're doing a little bit more research there to see if that's something that, I'm sure we're going to put them on here, but I just want to understand some of those details. So they're not included in the current draft that you're looking at. And then two other things that Allison and I have been talking about is potentially a creation of a capital stabilization account separate from our stabilization account that we could fund for capital needs in future years. And the other is the creation of a stormwater enterprise account, which would allow us to fund things like our MS4 permitting requirement and professional services that we hire to help us with coastal storms, but also overtime. And I'm pulling together some information on that. We could go through a winter and hopefully have 0 coastal storms on weekends or at night. Or we could go through and have 12. And when that happens, it's a budget buster for police, fire, DPW. So having a separate stormwater enterprise account would give us the ability to fund those things out of there instead of jeopardizing the general fund account. So those are a couple other articles that are not included in the draft that you're voting on tonight, but may be included at future town selectment meetings. So that's the warrant.
Thanks for that summary, Tony. Well thought out as always. Thanks for reviewing that for us and the public. I don't have any questions. Anyone else have any questions?
No,
I'm good, Josh. Thank you.
All right, I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to close the 2025 annual town meeting warrant and send to the Advisory and Finance Committee for their review.
Second.
Oh, that was the wrong, wait a minute, yeah. Yes, that was the right motion, sorry.
just seconded.
Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Gene Canty, aye.
Rob Tibble, aye.
We have a similar motion to approve the omnibus budget. and send to the Advisory and Finance Committee. Anyone want to take that motion? I'll take that motion. I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the omnibus budget.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board of Selectmen, I'm sorry,
Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
are we good? Okay, I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the omnibus budget as presented and send to the Advisory and Finance Committee for their review.
Second,
Okay, seconded. All right, so, you wanna walk through that, Tony?
Yes, thank you. So you each received a copy of the budget in your email. What I'd like to start with is a small presentation that may help walk us through the process and the result. Is it on your screen?
Yep.
yes,
Okay. So when we are developing our budget, we start with determining our revenues for the upcoming year. And we divide those into two separate buckets: general fund revenue and free cash revenue. General fund revenue is used for operating expenses. It's generated in the same fiscal year as the expense. So the property taxes, the local receipts, the state aid that we're going to receive after July 1st are the same dollars that we're going to spend after July 1st. So we have to really hone in on what that estimate is. And then at town meeting, we vote on how we're going to spend those funds. And mostly it's from property taxes, which is capped by 2.5%, and it comes from local receipts and state aid. Free cash revenue is different. Free cash is like a Christmas bonus. It varies every year. You don't know how much you're going to get, so you don't want to use it for operating expenses like salaries. You want to use it for one-time expenses like capital investment or investing in your reserves like stabilization or OPEB and paying down debt. Free cash is actually generated from a prior fiscal year. It's the sum of under-expended appropriations and over-generated receipts. So when we closed the fiscal year back in June, we determined how much money we brought in revenue that was above what we estimated, and we determined how much money we spent that was below what we appropriated. And the sum of those two differences come together as our free cash amount. It gets certified by the Department of Revenue, and it's provided to us this year to vote on for next year. So it's actually, there's a 1 fiscal year gap between, when free cash is generated and when it is spent. If you look at this chart, you can see that from fiscal year 25 to 26, our general fund revenue bucket increased by $554,000. Our free cash bucket actually decreased by $354,000. Now, don't be alarmed by the decrease. The previous fiscal year and years prior to that, we experienced a large amount of free cash because of the effects of ARPA money, being able to use ARPA money for public health related items, things of that nature that we didn't have to spend general fund money on. We also, if you remember, 9 Little Nahant Road was an unexpected revenue of, what was that, $300,000 or $400,000 when we recovered those unpaid taxes and interest. So $800,000 in free cash is actually healthy for our size budget. That's right about where we want to be on an annual basis, even though it's a decrease compared to last year. So looking at the general fund bucket, as I mentioned, our total is $16,150,000 $142,487. That is generated by mostly, as you can see, the large darkest green color here, $13 million comes from property taxes, and then local receipts, and then Cherry Sheet. I always say Cherry Street because of the fish and lobster place. Cherry Sheet state aid. And I call out the increases from last year. That far right box combines increases of the local revenue and the property tax. And that number is 385,884. That's really our number. The Cherry Sheet increase or total amount, most of that is, it's Chapter 70 money, Chapter 90 money, or pass through for other assessments. It kind of lives outside of our general fund. So for us, when we're looking at building the next budget, that number of 385 is our growth from last year to next year. So our next task is basically, how do we take the general fund revenue that we have and put it into the different items that we need to spend on. And we look at, what do we absolutely have to pay for to start with? So you start with, you look at employee contracts, so that could be individual contracts or collective bargaining agreements. You look at school assessment. What do we owe Swampscott? What do we owe Essex Tech? Special education, tuition and transportation costs, which is based on the number of students that qualify for that. It's a huge variable on an annual basis. And actually this year, it's one of the larger increases that caused a burden on developing a balanced budget. You look at insurances. What do we owe for health insurance and liabilities? Health insurance was the other largest, one of the largest burdens on our balancing our budget. We got a 19% increase, which equals about $170,000 over last year. That is industry wide. I've talked to a lot of different town administrators who are, in Maya or use GIC or some other health insurance offer, and everyone is getting hit with double-digit increases this year, and it's expected to last for the next 3 years. We look at retirement benefits and then our debt burden. What's the minimum amount we have to pay towards debt this year? And then we get to department requests. We ask every department to submit to us their request for next year's budget. So as you get through this list and the sum of these needs start, exceed the amount of revenue that we have, you have to start to readjust. And I highlight special education because there's alternative funding sources through circuit breaker that can help offset the cost of those needs from using general fund money to pay for it. So circuit breaker money will actually reimburse, I think it's up to 75% in tuition and up to 50% in transportation. So we
what's circuit breaker funding?
Circuit breaker it's basically those two items. It's based on how many students you have in special education, what those costs are, and the state will help a town absorb those costs, not in full. And it's a little tricky. I'm not an expert on it. But I believe it's in some ways it's based on your numbers last year, and then it's giving you funding this year. So it's not a perfect apple to apple adjustment. But what we do is we go to the school, we say, what do you estimate to receive in circuit breaker this year? And then we take that amount and deduct it from the general fund to the school and ask them to fund it through that instead. And the department, so even after doing that, if you get down to the department requests, and you don't have enough money to do everything they're asking for, you have to go through this analysis of really what they're asking for. What do you really need versus what do you want? And what can we adjust from last year? So that's like a zero-based budget approach. If we gave, $50,000 to a department for a one-time capital need through their budget last year, we're not just adding to that amount. We're eliminating that amount because they spent it, they used it. So it's really like adjusting last year's numbers instead of just adding to last year's numbers. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the strategy. I try to explain with this slide what the strategy is and how we try to, develop our balanced budget.
Can I just blurt something out while I think of it, and we can talk about it more later, but, thinking about the special education, transportation and tuition costs, I know that's, hard to predict, and B, varies widely from year to year. I wonder if that would be appropriate, if some contribution to the stabilization fund would be appropriate for that purpose, to sort of smooth out the peaks and valleys of the variations we see year to year on that. So
Yeah,
about that later. It's just a thought when we were looking at this information.
that's exactly why you have the stabilization account, right? So if you suddenly have a large increase in special education costs and it's not fully funded by circuit breaker and you're struggling to cover that deficit, you could go to town meeting and ask to pull money out of stabilization to cover that cost.
Tony, how soon does the administration know that they're going to have an added on special ed student or approval for that student or students?
So they know today how many students will require special education in the upcoming fiscal year, but they won't know until, I think they said May or June. They won't know their confirmed circuit breaker amount.
Okay.
So we have to, it's an estimate at this point. We estimate using a formula how much circuit breaker they'll receive. We do it in a conservative way, so we estimate low. But there's also, actually last year, the school did this. Circuit breaker does allow for extraordinary relief. So in a given year, if you had a large spike and your circuit breaker amount is based off of last year, but this year, all of a sudden you have, multiple more students in special education, you can seek emergency relief through circuit breaker. The school actually did that last year. So there is another mechanism, Josh, for additional circuit breaker relief for those special education costs. So this slide, what this is illustrating is that if we were to basically, after looking at all of our needs and all of our requests funded out of the general fund, we would need $17.2 million to do that. But we only have 16.1. So that's the spread. So we had to go through a lengthy process of, eliminating some requests. There's a lot of requests that we weren't able to fund this year, pushing some priorities off, adjusting, budgets based on last year. Some for instance, some of those requests that came in may have been built off of last year's budget by adding a percent increase. But going through the process of actually looking, what was the money that was appropriated to you last year for? Was it a one-time thing? Did you spend it? Did you complete it? Yes. Okay, so let's delete that and build from there. So, you know, it just, the point is you got to go through a detailed process to try to bridge the gap. Similarly, now looking at free cash, which is a separate bucket, as I said before, you know, we have $813,000. But the requests that we got, as well as our priorities, added up to just over $1 million. And we look at those priorities for us are funding stabilization, funding OPEB, funding department capital needs, looking at, you know, debt. We, in the operating account, we pay the minimum. If we have extra free cash, which we've done in years in the years past, we'll put that towards paying more than the minimum and pay down principal. And then department capital wants, you know, what is something you might want something this year, but we can't afford it. Can it be pushed off to next year? So what's in red there are things that we weren't able to do this year. And even under department capital needs, for example, as we went through the warrant, we actually are pulling from last year's money to fund some of those needs this year. So without that, we wouldn't even be able to do all the capital needs that we're doing. That's how tight we are related to, you know, the big picture. But at the end of the day, once we put together the operating budget, here's some numbers. The general fund actually is looking at a decrease. And the reason that number is so big is because when we voted on the general fund last year, we shifted free cash into it for some capital needs. So it's not that drastic of a decrease. As you could see, our operating bucket actually grew. But just, you know, when you do this analysis and you're comparing last year's voted number in the general fund to this year's, that's how it looks. It's actually not. A lot of that is free cash that was put into the operating budget voted on last year. But general government is a small decrease, $3,000. Public safety that's a standard increase. Most of that is collective bargaining agreements, but also included in that is a focus towards this effort that we're making in the fire department. You might recall last year we funded through free cash a pilot program that allowed a call firefighter to work a full-time shift alongside our 2 full-time firefighters in that shift. And the chief, you know, can speak more to it. I know he's not here, but he can speak more to the benefits of that. But it was extremely successful. You know, right now, if we have just 2 full-time firefighters on staff and they go on a medical call and drive resident to the hospital, there's no one in the fire department unless someone answers a callback to fill the fire department while they're out of town. When you have that call firefighter working a shift, that third extra person, those 2, the call firefighter and 1 full-time, can take the trip to the hospital while that other full-time firefighter stays back and hopefully someone else responds to a callback. So if anything else occurs in town while they're out of town, we have staff in town to handle that. It's also done a tremendous amount of benefit to the call department, including them in the full-time shifts, training them on a regular basis, getting them ready to, getting them prepared for when the call actually occurs, and they show up. Rob, I'm going to lean on you a little bit here to talk more about that. You have extensive experience at the fire department.
Well, Tony, as we talked about this afternoon, I'm absolutely thrilled with this change. It really benefits the town in so many ways. It's, it's not just the time that the two full-time firefighters are out of town to drive somebody to the hospital. They could be sitting over there for a while, waiting for the patient that they've moved to the hospital to be accepted. They have to stay there with them. So that process can take a very long time, leaving us unprotected. I think typically we can count on one full-time firefighter to respond, sometimes two. But it's typically, I think, we're leaning heavily on one or two people in town to be available during the day, should that ambulance have to cross the causeway. The process that you've described is fantastic. Obviously, everybody on that in that ambulance is an EMT. They all have to carry the same certifications. The full-timer definitely will have more experience. The call firefighter that responds and perfectly capable of driving that ambulance over to the hospital, leaving another call firefighter here in town to help protect the town. So many times in my time with the call fire department, when the ambulance was out of town and there was nobody available to cover the station, and we'd get a medical call, we'd do the best that we could, but not all of us were even EMTs at that point. So we've made quantum leaps as far as helping to protect the people in town. If there is a fire, God forbid, we're sending two firefighters. NFPA, National Fire Protection Association, says that we should have a minimum of four going out the door on the first engine out. What's their responsibilities? Well, you've got one person that's going to jump off the truck and make the hook up to the hydrant. The truck is then moved to the fire. Somebody's got to run the pump panel while at least two people are going into the building with a hose. I can tell you any number of times when I didn't see that happening. There was nobody to hook up to the hydrant. We had to call back to whoever was responding to please do that for us, hoping that we had enough water in the pump to carry us while we were waiting for that second engine to come in. The town has been on a delicate balance, and we've been very, very fortunate, townspeople in the fire department, that no one has been seriously hurt by cutting our margins so thin. So what an opportunity.
It's interesting, Rob. I had a similar conversation today with Tony, and I was asking or pushing for another firefighter, a third firefighter for the station. What I wasn't thinking about was that would require hiring three firemen, not one. Is that correct, Tony? Because you'd have to cover every shift.
Exactly. Yeah, and to do something like that, we'd have to generate more revenue. We'd have to find a way. We don't have the ability to do something like that under our current abilities, but it's 1,000% a need. The police station as well, the police department, is understaffed as well. There are times, where at night, every day, where you have one officer in dispatch and one officer on the road. And that, is risky for the protection of that single officer who's out there alone. So there's, but these personnel needs are major costs. So what we're doing here, last year we funded through free cash a pilot program. If we're going to continue it, and we should, we really should shift that funding to the general fund. We shouldn't be funding it on an annual basis with free cash. We also are increasing it a little bit, so hopefully we could do with the amount of money we're putting there, we can do 1.5 times the amount of shifts that we were able to do this past year under the pilot program. And I think I got to commend the union too, and the full-time guys. The chief had all the full-time firefighters and the call firefighters fill out a survey after the pilot program with a number of questions, asking them about the program, what they liked, what they didn't like, how it could change. And the common denominator from everyone, full or call, was the amount, the additional support and protection and reliability of having that additional guy, how much safer it made them feel for when the call comes in, and their ability to serve the town the way that they're expected to. So it's a very positive experience so far. We're encouraged by it. We'd like to continue to support it. School, as you can see here, 2.4% increase. Now, again, their expenditure is more than that. That's the amount that's coming out of the general fund. As I mentioned earlier, we worked with them, with the superintendent, to figure out alternative funding sources to support their needs going into next year. Public Works, a lot of that decrease again is due to capital items that we removed from their budget because we used them last year. Culture and recreation, and insurance and benefits. I mean, you can see that is one of the biggest cost increases that we're facing this year. And then you get the enterprise accounts too. Water sewer enterprise, on the positive side, a lot of that decrease is due to a reduction in our assessment to MWRA, which is the result of the DPW doing a really good job on an annual basis of investigating and repairing potential leaks. So the more you do that, the better your assessment is in future years. They've been very good at that, been working, putting an aggressive effort towards that, and it's showing results. And most of the increase in rubbish enterprise is our contract with Waste Management. Our assessment went up. But after looking at all that, and the decreases and the challenge that we're facing and adjusting and moving money around in order to balance our budget, as you can see in the far right corner, we've tried to fund a significant percentage of the requests that came in from all these departments. And we tried to do that as equally as possible. Again, some of it, is skewed because of capital requests that we just weren't able to support. But as you can see, we tried to spread it around evenly and do as much as we could for all the departments. So, thank them for working with us on this tough year. I will say that as I talk about how tight this year is and how tough it was a year to balance, I do think that our outlook moving forward is good. A lot of the reasons of our struggle this year is that we have, these major increases in insurance, which isn't going to go away, unfortunately. We have a major increase in special education, which that varies every year, and you have some circuit breaker money to help with those costs. But on the revenue side, and specifically to Coast Guard housing, we used to be collecting rent from 12 units on an annual basis to help fund our operating expenses and debt payments. That obviously isn't happening right now. We will eventually, though, once the properties are sold and developed, we will experience new growth in our property tax, but we won't experience it yet. And then the free cash revenue that we're getting from selling the properties to this point are required to pay down debt. So the 1.86, which we've paid down from the original borrowing of purchasing the lot, and then the 1.3 million that we borrowed to prepare the lots for sale. So the rest of the revenue that we receive for the sale that will be free cash in a future year, we won't see it until next year. We'll be voting on that at next year's town meeting. So, you know, I don't want to say that next year won't be a tight budget, but it shouldn't be as tight should those properties get developed and we get some new growth in as it is this year. And hopefully, you know, our expenses level out. But every town is going through it since COVID. You know, when over 90% of our revenues comes from property tax, which is capped at 2.5% increase year after year, and expenses are growing at a far higher rate. You know, the math just doesn't work over time. So, you know, I think we'll be in better shape next year. And as this new growth comes in, you know, as we always try to do, we try to aggressively seek grants to help create cost savings on our expenses in future years. We try to aggressively pay off debt to reduce our debt burden in future years, which frees up more general fund money for operating expenses. So there's a lot of different elements to it. And that's the general overview.
Yeah, thanks for that very detailed review, Tony. I know you and Allison have really had your work cut out for you. I think, you know, between the 1.1 million on the general fund that we were over and the 200,000 from the free cash, that's 1.3 million you had to you know, address. That's over 8%. So you know, thank you and Allison, and especially thanks to all the departments that you know, cooperated, and you know, as you showed, you know, everybody had to give a little to make this whole thing work out. And I know it wasn't easy, but you know, thanks for doing a good job.
Thank you. Thank you, Allison, and thank you everyone else that contributed to the process.
So let's see.
You made the motion.
Vote.
That was discussion. So yeah, now it's just
Yep.
voting.
Yep. So any further discussion in the omnibus budget? Okay, hearing none, roll call vote.
Gene Canty, aye.
Rob Tibble, aye.
Josh Antrim, aye. Okay, ongoing business, MBTA 3A zoning. You're on a roll, Tony. You wanna status here?
Planning board had a meeting last night. We talked a little bit about this. We are required to meet the MBTA zoning requirement by the end of this year in order to be compliant. We factored into that omnibus budget. We put in some extra funds for a special town meeting. We're not taking that issue up at the annual town meeting, but likely in the fall, we will have a special town meeting to take up that issue. And I reached out to, we have a grant through the state and a contract with MAPC for technical assistance in assisting with the process of developing a zoning article and going through an analysis and public engagement. I reached out to them to see if we could set up a time to meet with them and a member or two from the planning board to, start the discussion of setting up a schedule and a scope of work. So the pressure is on when you think about how fast the fall will come, especially after town meeting, you get right into Memorial Day, and then you're into the summer, July 4th. Before you know it, it's August, and there's a lot of work to do. Planning board was great last night, receptive. And so we're taking the next step. And hopefully our next conversations with MAPC to set up that schedule and scope and kind of lay out a game plan of how do we get something prepared for a town meeting vote. But I emphasized with the planning board last night, for me, public engagement is going to be a massive part of this process. Especially when you're doing a lot of these public meetings over the summertime, it's hard to get people to, spend time at committee meetings and learn about things. So figuring out a way, and because it's a special meeting, it's a special town meeting, people aren't used to a special town meeting. It's so important that we get the public engagement piece right, that people know there's a meeting coming, that people know what the topic is about, what the proposal is, what the, evaluation of our options is, and that they're educated about it and ready to, and put in a position to make a educated decision at that special town meeting. So it's gonna be tough, but we got to do it. So trying to get on that, get that process started sooner than later.
Yep, so we'll have an article on the accessory dwelling units on annual town meeting in May. And then MBTA 3A will be its own special town meeting topic. It's a topic that a lot of people have strong opinions about. And so I agree, Tony, that public engagement is going to be key. There's people are going to want a chance to express their opinions and really be part of that process. So I'm kind of appreciative of the fact that the ADU and the MBTA 3A are going to be addressed at separate meetings because they both have their own challenges. The state's really keeping us hopping with these housing initiatives. So yeah, got to work for it, cut out for us, and in particular the planning board does. So I'm glad they're working towards that goal. So
Hey, can I step back for just a second and thinking about what Robbie was saying and what Tony was saying about the shortages in the police and fire. That's worrisome. Just in the short period of time between the conversation and my talking about it, it would seem as though we've got to keep this out in front of us on a regular basis and try to come up with some means of funding those personnel. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you can't do it. But we've got to make every effort to do it.
You're right. And I also want to mention the school too. The school is another place where, they have identified priorities in adding special staff to ensure that the students get the right, get the services that they require. and keep them in Johnson School versus, transferring to another school system. And
Yeah,
so yes, all of it's very important. I don't think any of us disagree with the needs, but how do you fund it? And, to me, think costs like that would require an override, an operating override. When we get there, I don't know. But I think it's coming. I think it's, you should tune in to the finance committee meeting when Austin and Chief Furlong and the school speak about their particular budgets and their needs and why they're identifying them, because they can speak at length, and all of it's
exactly.
extremely important.
Yeah, you're right.
All right. So that's all I had on 3A.
All right. Coast Guard housing update.
All right, so we had a bid opening yesterday for lot number 10. We are awarding the high bid of $610,000, which came in $60,000 over the asking price of $550,000. We
Well,
actually
the minimum really, right?
minimum. Yep. We had 3 bids. The second highest bid was, I think, around 600,000. And
605, you said,
605, and
$1.
yeah, the third bid was well, it was under 6, but it was over 550. I forget the exact number. So we had a good response. So by my math, if we had 1.86 originally borrowed for the purchase of the property, 1.3 for the preparing the lots for sale, that's about 3.1. And to date, we've closed on and now awarded $3 million. So we're only about $100,000 away from paying off all the debt associated with this effort. That's a really positive note. I reached out to Peter Barba, the chairman of the Coast Guard committee, and let him know, because it's not just it's not just for us to applaud. It's also that the Coast Guard committee, design and development committee, and the amount of time that they worked on it, and even prior to them and town meeting, this is a 20-year process. I've said it a million times. There's so many people that have been involved. So everybody deserves credit for where we are right now. But we have another 5 properties listed for sale. We have a bid opening tomorrow, and then Tuesday and Thursday next week, and the same the following week. So we'll see how we end up.
Good. All right. Town administrators report.
Okay, so
Anything left?
yeah. Well, first of all, I wanted to congratulate Chief Furlong. He was awarded the Nahant Town Pride Award by the Greater Lynn Chamber of Commerce. So for his efforts, not only what he's dedicated to the town of Nahant, but he also heavily involved in the toy drive at Christmas time. So I just wanted to give him a shout out and congratulate him for that award. We're also let's see, where's my we have on March 4th, we have 4 call firefighters graduating the academy. As you guys have heard Austin talk about the struggles that we've had over the years in refilling the roster on the call fire department. He's done a tremendous job at getting new recruits in and through the academy. So those graduates are Joseph Amaro Jr., Matthew Donahue, Matthew Frary, and Eric Spector. So I want to congratulate those four for the work that they've done through the Fire Academy, and congratulate Chief Antrim on his success in refilling the roster. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention too that on Friday there was a small fire in town, and our police department, luckily a neighbor caught it, called it in. Our police department arrived immediately and was able to get a fire extinguisher on the fire. Fire department was right behind them and able to control and really limit damage. And they did just a tremendous job working together, responding to that call, and really saving one of our residents' home. So I wanted to commend both departments there for that too.
Yeah, we're lucky to have such a great police department and fire department, and congratulations to Chief Furlong and Chief Antrim on their fine work.
And then, okay, one last thing. Last week, we submitted our appeal document. I think did I send that to you all? I'm not sure if I sent the final version to you all, but we were able to submit our appeal towards the FEMA damage money from the March 2018 storms for the Little Nahant portion of Short Beach Dune. So we received damage money for that project. We went back to FEMA for additional funds because of the cost increase on materials, and they came back and denied the eligibility of the project based on federal rules and regulations. Now, we were able to get that mitigation grant, which will actually do more than just repair. You know, that damage money is to repair the dune to its state right before it was damaged by the storm. The mitigation money is going to go above and beyond that. So luckily, you know, we're in good shape on that. But the reasoning behind the denial of eligibility was concerning to me on how it could set a precedent for other properties in town. So we told FEMA that we would be appealing it, you know, mostly based on that merit. I don't know how it will go, but I just wanted to let you know that we did meet the deadline. It ended up being like a 14, 15-page document when we were done with it. But Mima helped us a lot with it. Vicky Masson, Trey Roosman helped a lot. Zach helped a lot. So we were able to get that in.
Yeah, thanks for that. You described you sort of outlined your approach there. It made a lot of sense. I think it sounds like you made a very strong case in that appeal. So fingers crossed, I guess.
Yep. All right, I'm done.
We'll see if the citizens are done. Next up is citizens comment. So if anybody has any questions or comments, you may unmute yourself, state your name and address, and speak your mind. I'm waiting to see a hand go up or someone unmute themselves. And I am not seeing it. So going once, going twice. Okay, no citizens' comments. So with that, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to adjourn.
Second,
Okay, roll call vote.
Gene Canty, aye.
Rob Tibble, aye.
Josh Andrew, Mike. Good night, everyone. Have a
Good
nice
night.
evening.
Night.
Good night.
Stay warm.